This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, viewers. So, in my part 2 lecture, I finished with the determinants of working capital. The last point was hazards and contingency. And today, we will start with another aspect of working capital, that is profitability versus liquidity trade off. Now, we should keep in mind that higher working capital requirement means higher liquidity, but it will earn lower profit. So profitability is lower. That means liquidity and profitability goes in the inverse. If a company wants to go for higher liquidity, that means more and more working capital, net working capital they will have to keep, they'll have to maintain. But side by side, the cost of working capital will go high and that will reduce the final profitability. Or vice versa, low working capital equal to higher profitability, risk of insolvency. Basically, this risk of insolvency that is needed to be discussed a little bit. So, if a company enjoys higher net working capital, in that case, the company is fully secured that it will not be insolvent or bankrupt in near future because liquidity crunch will not be there. But if working capital is low, that means here net working capital, that means the liquidity is directly getting affected. Obviously profitability will be more. But looking at profitability, if the company wants to compromise with its liquidity, then automatically the risk of insolvency will be high. At any point of time, if the working capital requirement comes, so in that case, it will be if the company cannot arrange at that point of time urgently, that will cause high damage for the company. So always a company should go for a proper trade-off between profitability and liquidity. So how this trade-off can be done? Company, you see here, I'm showing you three approaches. Company can go for either aggressive strategy or they can go for conservative strategy. And there is another one which bears moderate risk, that is matching strategy. So, what is aggressive strategy? In a nutshell, it's a very long discussion since this video lecture is for the basic concept of working capital. I'm not going into so much of details for that. So, since it is aggressive strategy, so company may think that we'll keep least net working capital, least amount of net working capital. That means whatever is required, that only we'll keep in a simple way. So again, it has a connection with the permanent and seasonal working capital. So in this strategy, under aggressive strategy, what company can do, that is, once they're finding out their permanent requirement, so they will fund that requirement through long-term sources of fund. And over and above the permanent requirement, whatever portion is the seasonal requirement or temporary requirement, that will be funded by short-term sources, that is current assets. That means company is not keeping any margin. So here, net working capital is basically zero. And net working capital basically zero. It means highly sensitive situation. What earlier we have seen in the slide, profitability versus liquidity. So NWC zero means high compromise level with the liquidity factor. Though it is the most profitable strategy, as we are finding in the bracket high profitability. But you see, every time if the company looks for the profitability, then the company is compromising with its existence, with its stake. So company usually cannot go for fully aggressive strategy. There is another one which is fully defensive strategy, that is conservative strategy. Now here it is a peculiar strategy because remember the example what I had given, that is around the year requirement of working capital month-wise. So here what company does, that is they take the highest requirement in any month as the permanent working capital. That means the entire working capital is funded by long-term source. So there is basically no need for short-term sources because they have already planned for the highest level of working capital requirement to be funded by long-term source. Now here you have to keep in mind one thing, that is long-term funding is always much more costlier than short-term funding. For example, if the working capital loan can be availed at 4%, so long-term loan usually is available against 8 to 9% rate of interest. Automatically, you can understand that by adopting conservative strategy, a company is ensuring highest possible safety level in terms of liquidity, right? Company is saving, the company is totally saved from the point of view of uh, bankruptcy, right? But the thing is, profitability touches its lowest. So, can a company either go for compromising full liquidity or they can go for compromising full profitability? Means they have to choose a middle path, a moderate way. That is, they should not be fully aggressive, they should not be fully conservative. And here the term trade off between profitability and risk is coming, which is basically applied by the company through a matching strategy, that is moderate risk and moderate profitability. So there is a huge uh, expansion, a huge, sorry, not expansion, huge explanation for these strategies. So later on, we can come back to this in more detailed fashion. Now, let me discuss something about the demerits of high and low level of working capital. Now, surplus working capital, that is the high working capital level, means company has arranged for working capital than it actually needs. Now you may say that it is good for the company, that is company is in a safe position from the liquidity aspect. But now you see what are the problems may come there. Number one, high working capital maintenance may be in the form of high inventory holding, which is unnecessary, which may be unnecessary comparing to its production and sales point of view. Then, high working capital can come in another way, that is inefficient credit collection policy. Now, inefficient credit collection policy means the buyers are not paying on time. They are demanding for more and more time frame for repayment. So working capital is remaining blocked there. Now, do you think these things are reflecting high working capital, but are they good for the company? No. Why no? Because it is the indication of undertrading or overcapitalization, which is not at all desirable for a company. That means, in another way, I can say that it indicates the management's inefficiency to manage current assets properly. Holding of inventory uh, more than the standard level, or the delay in conversion of cash of the receivables from the customers. So these things reflect inefficient management of current asset, right? And it is a sign of stagnancy of the business, because see, if the raw material is stored for a long time, why unnecessary holding, I'm telling? Because if it is held up in the warehouse, in the store for a long time, that means there is a miscalculation. Production department and marketing department has no direct synchronization properly. Production department has no information about how the order in the market is fluctuating. They are going on producing as per their own process. But marketing department, they are not able to generate orders like before. So what is happening? Raw material is held up in the store. Even the finished products, they are also held up in the store. But if earlier communication or earlier management of current asset. Earlier communication was possible between marketing and production department, or sales or production department. So production department could have got hints that the market demand for the product is going to fall. So production would have been controlled accordingly, which is not. And that is the reason for high holding of inventory. And for the debtors, that is comparatively difficult to manage comparing to inventory, because inventory management is directly in the hand of the company, but debtors management to some extent it depends on the external situation in the market. I told earlier that in the cutthroat competitive market, if my company says that my competitor company is getting more customers by just allowing higher credit period, so obviously I have to go with the same, because nowadays none of the companies compromise with the quality, and there is very little scope for price escalation or other things, right? So therefore, high working capital maintenance does not always reflect the point that company is in a very good position. Rather, on other way, it is eating up the profitability of the company. And what the demerits of inadequate working capital? If sufficient working capital is not there, it stagnates the growth of the company. It is a threat to the solvency directly. We have already discussed earlier. It is an indication of overtrading or undercapitalization, means without arranging for proper working capital, you are going for doing more business. That is overtrading and undercapitalization, right? And one thing is very important here, that is inadequate working capital hampers in implementing any plan instantly. It makes it difficult to implement any instant plan. Then it also prevents to avail attractive credit opportunities from their suppliers. Side by side, inadequate working capital does not permit the company to allow more credit period for payment. And in this way, if the total production and sales are hampered because of inadequate working capital, so what we can say, that proper utilization of fixed assets have not taken place, right? So under working capital strategies, these things are also very important. That is, whether a company will maintain standard level of working capital, or they will maintain surplus working capital. In any case, inadequate working capital is totally unwanted. But side by side, surplus working capital, as I have already discussed, I think you have understood that it is also unwanted. Why unwanted? Inventory is high, debtors is high, so working capital is blocked. Cost of capital will be high. So what is the benefit? Just by showing in pen and paper that you see we are enjoying very high liquidity. Is there any benefit out of that? It is definitely not. So always a company must think of maintaining a moderate working capital level. Always. So that it will not create pressure on cost of capital, it will not create pressure on profitability, it will not create a situation of high risk. Okay. So for any company, it is the best strategy is to maintain the moderate risk and moderate profitability situation. Right? So here is the end of my part 3 session. In the part 4, we will go for different means and modes of financing of working capital. So till then, goodbye. We'll meet again in part 4. Thank you.